Rivers, they hide untold secrets beneath their surface, secrets that have been lost to time. They conceal the evidence of unspeakable tragedies, crimes that are buried deep in their currents. And that's exactly what happened in the small, quiet town of Wara, Oklahoma. On one chilling day in October 1996, the waves brought forth a horrifying discovery. The body of a young girl, a teenager, whose face had been completely erased, an unrecognizable, nameless soul washed up by the river. This small town, with a population barely over 2,000, where everyone knew each other, was suddenly thrust into a nightmare that no one could have foreseen. A town where life moved slowly, unhurried, and without much excitement, until the fateful day when the body was discovered. At the center of this story was 16-year-old Heather Rich, a bright and beautiful young woman with a bright future ahead of her. She was an honor student, a cheerleader, and a beloved daughter. But beneath the surface, Heather was beginning to stray from the path her parents had hoped she'd follow. She was in that stage of rebellion where she wanted to experience life in all its unfiltered, risky glory. On the night of October 2nd, 1996, Heather and her mother, Gail, had a heated argument. It was about a $300 phone bill Heather had racked up chatting with her friends. It seemed trivial, but in a household struggling financially, it was the final straw. Her father, Dwayne, had been severely injured in a terrible accident at work, leaving him unable to provide for his family. The burden had fallen on Gail, who worked extra hours to make ends meet, especially with her husband needing expensive treatments. The argument escalated. Gail scolded Heather for her recklessness, while Dwayne remained more patient, but worried. Heather, in her rebellious teen angst, stormed off to bed, ignoring her mother's pleas. That night, in her silence, something was broken. It wasn't just an argument, it was the beginning of a tragic turn no one could have foreseen. The next morning, Heather didn't come down for breakfast. Gail, used to her daughter's moods, wasn't too concerned at first. But when she went to check on her, she found Heather's room empty. Her things were still there. No one had heard from her, and this was completely unlike Heather. She wasn't the type to just run away. Worried, Gail and Dwayne reported Heather missing to the sheriff's office. But the officers, dismissive, told them it was just a common case of a teenage girl running away after a fight. "She'll come back," they assured them. But Gail and Dwayne knew this wasn't like Heather. Determined, they took matters into their own hands. They contacted Heather's friends, including Randy Wood, her ex-boyfriend and the captain of the football team. Randy claimed he didn't know where Heather was. But there was something in his voice, something cold and rehearsed that set off alarm bells in Gail's mind. Days passed. No one knew anything. The police continued their half-hearted investigation, but all leads seemed to go cold. That was until, 5 days later, a body was discovered floating in the river, half submerged in the water. When the divers pulled it from the depths, the horror of what had happened became clear. The victim had been shot at close range, 9 times, with a shotgun. The face was so disfigured it was unrecognizable, but a piece of jewelry, an engraved ring, allowed Heather's parents to identify her. It was their daughter lying cold on that morgue table. The news spread like wildfire, and among the first to hear it was Randy Wood, who had been Heather's last connection. The shock of it all drove Randy to the bridge where Heather's body had been found. But there was a dark secret Randy kept hidden from everyone. He knew much more than he was letting on. The investigation soon uncovered a horrifying truth. Randy, along with his friend Josh Bagwell and another boy named Curtis Gamble, were involved in the gruesome murder. But what happened that night was not as simple as it seemed. It was a dark descent into jealousy, cruelty, and fear. Heather had planned to sneak out to meet Josh that night, despite her parents' strict rules. Josh, wealthy and popular, and Randy, the football star, were well known in town. The three of them, along with Curtis, who had a dark past, gathered at Josh's trailer. There, alcohol and marijuana flowed freely, and things began to spiral out of control. Heather, curious but out of her depth, found herself in a dangerous situation. And when she fought back against Curtis's advances, fearing for her life, the group made a devastating decision. They would end her life before she could expose them. They drove her to a remote bridge where Curtis took out a shotgun and began firing. 9 shots. 9 fatal shots. Randy, too horrified to act, covered his eyes, unable to stop the murder. Josh, too scared to intervene, just stood by. Together, they threw Heather's mutilated body off the bridge. As the investigation continued, Curtis was arrested. He confessed, dragging Randy and Josh down with him. The three boys, each with their own dark secrets, became the faces of a horrifying crime that no one could have predicted in their small, quiet town. The trial that followed was one of shock, disbelief, and heartache. Curtis, the instigator, was sentenced to life in prison. Randy, the seemingly noble football captain, faced life with the possibility of parole. Josh, who refused to cooperate with authorities, was also sentenced to life. But the pain didn't end with the verdict. The investigation and trial revealed a tragic truth. Heather had simply fallen into the wrong company. A rebellious teen trying to find herself in a world that was far too dangerous for her to navigate. In the end, this tragedy was a sobering reminder of how a small choice, a moment of weakness, can change the course of a life forever. And for the Rich family, the pain of losing Heather could never be undone. But they found solace in knowing the truth, in knowing what happened to their daughter, even if it was too late to save her.